Sir, please, don't go today, she cried, her hands trembling. He smirked and said, "You're just a maid. Don't tell me what to do." But within minutes, his entire world turned upside down. It was just past 7 a.m. when the quiet of the massive marble-floored mansion was broken by the hurried footsteps of a maid. Barefoot, her dupatta clinging to her shoulder, she rushed across the foyer as the towering figure of Mr. Aslan, Pakistan's youngest billionaire, descended the staircase with his usual cold confidence. He was dressed sharply in a tailored navy suit, his phone in one hand, car keys in the other, and not a flicker of concern on his face. Behind him, Meher, the maid, struggled to keep up. Her voice trembled as she called out, "Sir, please, don't go today." Aslan didn't even turn around at first. He hated delays, and today's meeting with international investors was critical. "You're already slowing me down," he muttered, glancing at his Rolex. Meher's voice grew louder, shakier. "I saw something last night, a terrible dream. Your car, fire, blood. It felt so real. Please just postpone today, just today." Aslan finally stopped, halfway through the grand hallway leading to the garage. He turned slowly, raising an eyebrow as if seeing her for the first time. A faint smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. "You clean floors, not futures," he said coldly, voice laced with amusement. "You people, you think a dream can change reality." "I know how it sounds, but something's not right," she pleaded, her hands shaking, tears forming in her eyes. "I'm begging you, don't go to the city today." He laughed, a short, sharp laugh that echoed through the mansion's vast corridors. "The only thing dangerous today is me losing millions because of some servant's bedtime horror story." She took a step forward, desperation surging in her voice. "Sir, please." But he had already turned his back. The sound of the key turning in the main door lock followed. She stood frozen, heart pounding, as the heavy wooden door slammed shut behind him. Silence returned. Only the ticking of the grandfather clock remained. Meher stood there for a long moment, her hands still slightly raised, her eyes glistening with fear. She looked toward the shrine near the kitchen entrance, where a small oil lamp flickered under a framed verse. Slowly, she walked over, sank to her knees, and lit 3 more incense sticks. "Protect him," she whispered under her breath. "Even if he doesn't believe, I do." Outside, the billionaire's black Lexus roared to life, rolling out of the driveway with tinted windows and the arrogance of invincibility. Inside, a maid sat trembling on cold tiles, holding on to a vision she didn't understand, but deeply feared. And fate had just begun to stir. The sound of the car engine faded into the distance, but the dread inside Meher's chest grew louder. She stood motionless by the door for a moment, as if hoping he might turn around and come back. But he didn't. He never listened, not to her, not to anyone. She slowly walked back into the quiet mansion, her slippers barely making a sound against the cold marble. The place suddenly felt heavier. The walls seemed taller, the air tighter. She crossed the hallway and entered the small servant prayer area tucked behind the kitchen. It was dark but familiar. A small clay lamp flickered beneath an old wooden shelf with a framed ayah resting against the wall. She lit it properly and sat down cross-legged, wiping the sweat from her forehead. Her hands shook as she closed her eyes, but the images came rushing back again. The dream. In her vision, it had been night. There was smoke, thick and black, pouring from a crushed black car, the same Lexus Aslan drove. The car was on its side, flipped against a broken divider. There was glass everywhere, a gold watch shattered, just like the one on his wrist. Blood smeared the dashboard. But what haunted her most was the sound, a phone ringing in the wreckage, and no one answering. Meher opened her eyes suddenly, her breath catching in her throat. Her heart raced. It hadn't felt like a dream. It had felt like a message. She reached for the prayer beads beside her and began to chant softly. Ya Hafiz, Ya Hafiz. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but each repetition gave her just enough strength to stay calm. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe he was right. Maybe she was just being dramatic. But no matter how many times she told herself that, her gut refused to settle. She stood up and walked over to the kitchen window that faced the city skyline. The sun was rising now, but thick clouds hovered low. A strange stillness lingered in the air, like the calm before a storm. Back inside, her co-worker Sana passed by, raising an eyebrow. "You okay, Meher Baji?" Meher didn't respond immediately. She just kept staring at the road that led toward the city. Then, almost under her breath, she said, "Something's going to happen today." Sana frowned. "You're scaring me." "I'm scaring myself," Meher replied, her voice low. She turned away from the window and went to the guest lounge. Quietly, she placed a glass of water on the table, then walked out and returned to the prayer corner. Sitting back down, she closed her eyes again and whispered one more time, "Protect him. Even if he doesn't believe, I still do." Outside, the clouds rolled in heavier. The day had barely begun, but for Meher, it already felt like something terrible was on its way. Downtown Karachi buzzed with its usual chaos. Honking cars, street vendors shouting, and a dull haze of humidity hanging over the skyline. The high-rise building stood tall among the clutter, all glass and steel, reflecting the gray sky. Inside on the 27th floor, Aslan stepped out of the elevator, fixing his cufflinks as two men in suits rushed to greet him. "Sir, investors from Dubai are already in the boardroom," one said, breathless. Aslan didn't break stride. "Let's not keep them waiting. I don't like wasting time, and neither do they." He entered the conference room, every inch of him radiating control. He spoke with ease, the numbers flowing effortlessly. On the surface, everything was perfect, polished, powerful, predictable. But outside, dark clouds were thickening. About 15 minutes into the presentation, the building shuddered slightly. Just a tremor, or maybe a gust of wind against the glass panels? One of the assistants flinched. Aslan didn't blink. "Continue," he ordered, pointing to the screen. "Q4 projections are where we make the real jump." Then, without warning, the lights flickered. Once, twice. The massive screen glitched, and then a loud alarm began to blare through the building. Red lights flashed. The automatic security system kicked in, fire alarm. A wave of confusion rippled through the room. "Is this a drill?" someone asked. "No notice was given," replied another, already rising. Aslan stood up slowly, frowning. He pulled out his phone. No messages, no calls, no alerts, just the blaring sound of the alarm and a deepening sense of tension in the air. A guard burst into the room. "Sir, we need to evacuate immediately." "What's going on?" Aslan demanded. "We don't know yet. Emergency response is on their way, but we have to move now." Aslan grabbed his briefcase and walked briskly toward the elevators, but they had already been disabled. Everyone was rushing toward the emergency staircase. As he descended, step by step, his confidence began to crack. Something felt wrong, eerily wrong. By the time they reached the lobby, news had already reached security. A black Lexus parked outside had caught fire. Aslan froze. "What?" he asked, his voice sharp. "Sir, it's registered to you." His breath caught. The staff ushered him outside. and what he saw made his blood run cold. His luxury Lexus, the same car he'd left home in just over an hour ago, was now a twisted mess of metal and smoke. Firefighters hosed it down as thick black fumes rose toward the sky. Glass shards littered the pavement. The back half of the car looked as if Aslan couldn't move. He stood frozen on the sidewalk, his sharp suit now damp from smoke and city dust, his perfectly styled hair disheveled from the chaos. Behind him, sirens wailed as paramedics pushed a stretcher past. A burned man groaned faintly. Not him. Not his driver. A courier boy who had been walking past the car at the wrong moment. His heart pounded as he replayed Meher's voice in his head. "Please, don't go today." He had laughed, mocked her, brushed it off like superstition. But now, standing just meters away from the twisted remains of his own car, that dream she described didn't seem so far-fetched anymore. His phone buzzed again, a news alert.
Breaking. Suspicious explosion in Clifton high-rise parking lot. 1 injured, private vehicle destroyed. Police investigating possible car bomb.
He gripped the phone tighter, his hand trembling. A car bomb? This wasn't just fate. This was targeted, deliberate. He looked around, as if expecting someone to step out of the shadows and explain everything. But there were only confused bystanders, flashing cameras, and his own heavy breaths. Suddenly, the building security head approached him. "Sir, we believe the vehicle was rigged, possibly timed. If you'd been in it." He didn't finish. Aslan didn't need him to. The image of the burning car flashed again in his mind, the same one Meher had seen in her dream. The gold watch, the flames, the sound of a phone ringing unanswered. She had described it all before it happened. Slowly, Aslan stepped back toward the street. The investor meeting, the deals, the money, all of it felt distant now, insignificant. He pulled out his phone again and stared at her name in the contact list. He had never saved her number properly, just made house. He hesitated, then tapped call. It rang once, twice. Then her voice came through, soft, steady. "Are you okay?" He didn't speak for a moment. Then finally, with a voice far quieter than anyone had ever heard from Aslan, he said, "You were right." Silence on the other end. Then she whispered, "I only said what I saw. Not everyone listens." He closed his eyes. "I should have." Another pause. Then she added, "God gave you a warning and mercy." He didn't know what to say to that. He, a man who had always believed in logic, power, control, brought to his knees by a maid's dream. The weight of everything sank in, not just the near-death experience, but the realization that his money hadn't saved him. Something else had. Someone else had. Without another word, he ended the call. He looked up at the sky, now darkened with smoke, yet somehow. That night, Aslan returned home, not with pride, but silence. He didn't head to his room or make a single call. Instead, he walked slowly to the servant quarters. Meher stood outside, surprised to see him. He looked at her, eyes no longer proud, but humbled. "I was supposed to die today," he said quietly, "but your voice saved me." She didn't reply, just looked down respectfully. "I never listened. I never even saw you as human," he continued, "but God used you to protect someone like me." He reached into his pocket and handed her a small folded envelope. "This is yours. A house. In your name. And a life away from here." Tears welled in Meher's eyes. As he turned to leave, she whispered, "Sometimes, sir, God speaks through the lowest voices." And for the first time, Aslan finally listened.